The truth about hysterectomies is that removing an organ is not actually solving the problem. So a lot of women that I speak to are considering hysterectomies because they are wanting to solve their heavy menstrual flow. They have been told that it is causing their anemia and that they go through tons of pain each month, and they are looking for a solution because nothing has worked. I myself used to faint from my menstrual cycles. I ended up in the emergency many of times because the pain was so unbearable that I wasn't sure what I was actually going through. I figured there had to be something else that was wrong and that it couldn't just possibly be a period cramp because it was the worst. So I don't say this from a standpoint of me not having any idea of what the pain feels like. I very much do. The significance of our menstrual flow, though, is that us losing iron each month is actually a good thing, and that's one of the reasons that we live longer than men. It's one of the ways that our body regulates minerals. So when we have a heavy menstrual cycle, our body is telling us that we have a lot of iron that's stored in the tissues, and it's not where it needs to be in the blood. Let's talk about that for a minute. So iron can be 10 times higher in the organs and the tissues than it is in the blood. That is a big problem, because we do not want our iron trapped in our tissues. Now, we know what happens when iron interacts with oxygen and water. Think of a cast iron pan. If you were to leave it out and not dry it right away, it would begin to rust. Well, our organs are no different. So what happens is that is a huge amount of stress that is putting the body under, and it has to find a way to get back to balance. So when women are struggling with fibroids and they think that their fibroids are causing their heavy bleeding, no, it was the iron that was built up in the womb space. Calcium went to stop the resting, so that iron wasn't interacting in that way anymore. If we are just removing organs to stop something, we're not actually solving the problem. I mean, not if we're looking at our long-term health, because our menstrual flow, like I said, is one of the reasons that we live longer than men. It's a huge benefit for us. If iron isn't where it's meant to be, that doesn't mean it's not in you, it just means that it's not functioning properly. So whether that's anemia, whether that's hemochromatosis, or something else that's a form of iron dysregulation, it just means that we have to regulate iron. It's simple. All right, so you're having these menstrual flow that is painful. They are for an extended period of time. There is a heavy amount of flow. How do we go about solving that? Well, we need to give the body the minerals that it needs to move iron properly. So one being vitamin A in the form of retinol. It's something that only comes from animal products. And I know that somebody's going to comment below and say that you can have plant-based products that are in the form of beta-carotene, but it takes 12 units of beta-carotene to equal 1 of retinol, and that differs depending on how the body is able to move iron. So if we aren't able to move iron properly, then that conversion can be a lot different. I personally, if the body is under stress, would think that it would be best to just give the body what it's looking for, and that's retinol. It needs retinol. Retinol is what moves iron. That's what loads copper into the protein called ceruloplasmin, and that's why retinol is far superior than a vegetable-based form. Next up is copper. Copper is depleted in our foods because it is not in the soil like it used to be. There was a study that was done from 1941 to 1991, and they found a 76% reduction in copper in our vegetable forms. That is just astronomically huge. I don't want to know what's happened over the last 30 years, but that is something that happens from the use of things like glyphosate. And even if it's not being sprayed directly on it, we are all still exposed to glyphosate, unfortunately. The third thing is ceruloplasmin. So this is what I like to call the bus. If you haven't watched any of my videos, I highly suggest going back and watching them. But this is a bus that moves copper to the mitochondria. It's basically a conveyor belt. It's going to move iron and copper, and that's key. So if we are missing any of those three things, where we aren't making what I like to call bioavailable copper, then that means that iron isn't going to function effectively. It's not going to function the way that it needs to, because iron doesn't move with more iron. It needs those three. Unfortunately, ceruloplasmin isn't something that we can buy in a supplement. It's made in the liver. We need proper protein consumption in order to make it, and something that also really helps is whole food vitamin C. These three also have a role in our pain management. Our pain receptors require copper and whole food vitamin C. And so that's how we can feel reduced pain from our menstrual cycle if we are focusing on these. So rather than jumping right to a hysterectomy after feeling like you've tried everything, try focusing on iron's movement, which is not iron levels. It's focusing on how iron moves, and it can be a huge game changer. Head on over to my links. I have a link in my website for supplements that help move iron, and that would be a really great place to start.